In the first week of September 2019, with Hurricane Dorian bearing in from the Atlantic, U.S. corporate media from print news to late night and everything in between became hyper-focused on just a couple messages from President Trump. As usual, they always intentionally skip over key information that undercuts any aspect of their whole self-superior pose, that they are so smart and Trump is so stupid that his supporters must be even dumber, and you all should just listen to what they say and vote for who they say to vote for. They need to twist facts and reframe everything to make themselves out to be superior. It's every bad thing about the establishment and elitism and over-centralization all wrapped into one. Because all through this period, official National Weather Service and National Hurricane Center forecasts continue to show a slight chance of storm force wind in southeast Alabama. People wonder why Trump would use a marker to bring attention back to the story for yet another day. But it's because he's aware of how the media operates. He also understands how the underground media will respond. And since the facts are on his side, it's worth dragging it on to expose the media for what they are and to get them to expend more energy. By the end of the week, the Birmingham Forecast Office had been slapped down by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and except for a brief attempt to exaggerate the response, the drive-by media stopped mentioning the story. It's remarkable to see the range of techniques the establishment media uses to try to assert their dominance at each level of the information stack, from the factual basis of the story in print and on TV, in a smug continuum straight through to late-night comedy.
And then there's Trump's ignorance when it comes to Hurricane Dorian, a Category 2 hurricane currently approaching the U.S.
This gag supposedly shows Trump's ignorance, but it's actually a carefully selected moment that is removed from context, then used to create the desired propaganda effect. The media make a big deal of Trump showing advisories from a day or two before the controversy, in the name of communicating what had actually happened during the lead-up to the storm, and to bring it back to a fair discussion. But they have no problem describing the storm as small using late data in the name of distorting what really happened, if it makes Trump look like he was overreacting and should just get over it. At other times, they remind everybody how large and dangerous the storm was, when they want to show how much they care and Trump doesn't, or how irresponsible he is and how prudent they are. They downplay the storm here, but by the next day it was back up to a Category 3, and just 48 hours earlier it was hitting the Bahamas as a Category 5. But the media and the comedy shows required this narrow twisting of the president's meaning for the framing of every single story.
And then there's Trump's ignorance when it comes to Hurricane Dorian, a Category 2 hurricane currently approaching the U.S.
Trump is so familiar with these ongoing media dynamics that one of his best bets is to continue to expose them, and where possible, to direct the media complex in repetitive cycles so more people notice and so it overspins. The marker, Sharpiegate, is the cheapest, fastest redirect yet.
It was the map he held up in the White House that led to immediate questions.
Alabama could even be in for at least some very strong winds, and something more than that it could be.
The National Weather Service even forced to correct him on Twitter, saying Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian.
Already they are getting the story wrong, because that video of Trump actually was a response to this tweet from the National Weather Service in Birmingham, about 4 hours later. Just for starters, think about this one narrative moment. How can they be forced to respond if this supposed response happened first? In reality, the 12:30 briefing responded to the earlier tweet and should have been the end of it. The briefing continued with Trump personally questioning the director of the NHC along these lines, and the director refused to put it in absolute terms like the Birmingham tweet had. But he did discuss the complexity of the models and how much uncertainty is involved, and how they are really trying to communicate that it's not just where it hits, but the size of the storm meant that it was dangerous in a much wider area.
We really tell the general public not to necessarily just focus on that center line where that is. We tell them focus on the cone, because that's based on our average error over the last 5 years. So really the way to think about it is the center could be anywhere inside that cone. So that allows for solutions for small changes. Could put this right along the coast. We can also see landfall moving northward. So that's why we really tell people to really pay attention and be ready with time.
If Trump had said something like, "Be ready with time," you'd have been hearing jokes about time machines and preppers chilling with beers as the storm approached because they had extra time that they'd saved up because Trump told them to. And a warning on every official NHC and NWS cone forecast emphasizes that hazardous conditions can occur outside the cone. No advisories from early that same Sunday morning, after the FEMA briefing and on into Monday, all continued to broadcast a slight risk of storm force winds in a southeast portion of Alabama stretching about 120 miles north from the southern border and 40 or 50 miles west of the southeast corner. The tweet from the Birmingham NWS forecast office was alone in saying Alabama would feel no impacts, even when advisories from NOAA and the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service still showed southeast Alabama with slight chances of storm-force winds. Yet for the next several days, the media hung all its exasperation on that one tweet. So again, that statement and questioning session with the NHC director was the response to the Birmingham tweet, not the other way around. Among many other twisting techniques, the media have no problem reversing the order and leaving out the fact that the director had a more measured, cautious approach that paralleled the president's, unlike the absolute language in the Birmingham tweet.
Exactly, but the president, I think, enjoys all of this because this becomes a media story, and if you are a Trump supporter, you believe him on this, and he has done a very good job of discrediting a lot of things. Never mind the fact that he's in the wrong.
Saying he's wrong here is a real stretch. And by the end of the week, the media had gone silent on this topic because the factual basis of the hive mind position had vanished, and continuing would have made them look obviously stupid even to their followers. It's not that savvy media consumers believe Trump, it's that the cherry-picking and emotional driving that the media engages in is so obvious. They try to stack everything in their favor, from the couple facts they select as starting points to dramatic gestures like throwing down pens. But almost everything this anchor says here is either twisted, exaggerated, or turns out, on closer examination, to have been wrong.
Look, no one disputes.
This is what I mean by twisted. He says, no one disputes, then inaccurately states the factual basis.
No one disputes that a week ago there were some projections that showed a possible slight effect on a small sliver of Alabama. The point is,
a week ago, a few days before the controversy, many models showed that Dorian could cross Florida and the center of the storm could actually come on shore in Alabama or even further west. And then in the days following that, as the center of the storm approached the Bahamas, forecasts continued to show large parts of Alabama could be affected with hurricane-force winds, even up to the day of the controversy and the day after that.
the point is that on Sunday, by the time he started warning Alabama, those were outdated and the projections no longer said Alabama was in the zone.
Either he's lying to you or the people that wrote his script are lying or didn't check. Trump's warnings for Alabama weren't that strong on Sunday, but advisories from a week before this CNN program showed the full storm could cross Alabama, and a sliver was still included on the day in question.
As the National Weather Service a few minutes later said so.
It wasn't the National Weather Service, it was a tweet from the NWS forecast office in Birmingham. It's worth noting that Alabama is covered by 4 National Weather Service forecast offices, and each one has a Twitter account. In fact, the entire media reaction stemmed from 3 short exchanges: a tweet from Trump at 7:51 a.m. Sunday morning, a tweeted response from the National Weather Service forecast office in Birmingham 20 minutes later at 8:11 a.m., and one sentence pulled from the FEMA briefing which started at 12:30 p.m. Yet all through this period, the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released many advisories showing an ongoing chance of storm-force winds in southeast Alabama. Trump had used the word hit in his tweet that morning, but it's clear this was a secondary list. In addition to Florida, it starts. Everything was focused on Florida at that point since the storm was right off the coast there, was still a Category 5, and could shortly thereafter have made landfall in Florida. He listed Alabama at the end of the list and said it would most likely be hit much harder, all matters of degree, unlike the point where the eye of the storm makes landfall. There's a slight chance of confusion, but he clearly didn't mean all of those states would be hit by the eye of the hurricane, as the news reports and comedy shows would have you believe. These media reports take a slight chance of confusion and make sure as much of their audience as possible remains confused. On the other hand, the tweet from the Birmingham forecast office used the word impacts and used absolute terms to say there would be none at all, even though official advisories clearly showed that there was still a chance of Alabama feeling some effects from the storm. If the Birmingham tweet had boldly stated that the eye of the storm will not hit Alabama, repeat, the eye of the storm will not hit Alabama, the media merely would have had one less detail that they had to distort and twist. So while the Birmingham tweet was actually out of bounds and anti-scientific, the president's statements hedged and left himself wiggle room and stayed within bounds, and are being intentionally misunderstood in these media productions. So much for respect for the office.
And most importantly, Trump was wrong.
Really, that's the most important thing? What kind of a person says that? And he's not even as wrong as they are, as I will show in about 10 seconds.
because 20 minutes later, the National Weather Service had to issue a clarification saying, and this is real, Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian will be felt across Alabama. The system will remain too far east.
But at the time of that tweet, the National Hurricane Center of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration actually did include part of Alabama in its tropical storm force wind advisories. And it was this exact same tweet that NOAA was rebuking when they said the Birmingham National Weather Service spoke in absolute terms that were inconsistent with probabilities from the best forecast products available at the time. The same statement also said that information provided by NOAA and the National Hurricane Center to President Trump and the wider public demonstrated that tropical storm force winds from Hurricane Dorian could impact Alabama. None of the other accounts tweeted a direct response to the president's references to Alabama, but later the same evening, the NWS Forecast Office for Mobile, Alabama tweeted, "The upcoming week could be a little warmer and drier than a typical week in September, and it all comes down to Dorian." This guy gets so far out over his skis with his jokes, it's almost sad that ultimately he's so wrong. Each of the video titles that I used in this commentary says so much. The MSNBC segment reads like a military psyop. This one includes the word obsessed.
Pump your brakes there, Al Roker. No one's apologizing because that map does not prove anything. First of all, it's not from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's from the South Florida Water Management District.
I'm starting to notice it's a running joke to make fun of local and regional offices with these people. If the Birmingham Forecast Office hadn't gone against Trump, they would have minimized them. Like you pretty much say the name of a regional department and people laugh.
Plus, right at the bottom of the map it says, National Hurricane Center advisories and county emergency management statements supersede this product. If anything on this graphic causes confusion, ignore the entire product.
But as we've seen throughout this video, forecasts from the National Hurricane Center included the southeast corner of Alabama during the time in question and for another 24 hours into Monday afternoon. These performers need to have a talk with their writers, who need to have a talk with the news department, because these people are getting sent out on the national stage with bad information. Only the one tweet from the Birmingham field office used such absolute language. Information from NOAA and the NHC continued to show Alabama could be affected. Later that Sunday evening, the NWS Forecast Office in Tallahassee, which actually includes the southeast corner of Alabama, reinforced the National Hurricane Center warnings, not the cavalier stance taken by Birmingham and subsequently picked up by the narrative-driven media.
And it may get a little piece of a great place. It's called Alabama, and Alabama could even be in for at least some very strong winds, and something more than that it could be. This just came up, unfortunately, the size of the storm that we're talking about. So for Alabama, just please be careful also.
That's all he said. It was a very calm, measured, mature perspective regarding preparedness, and it also responded appropriately to the Birmingham Forecast Office's tweet, since Trump clarified that he meant possibilities of storm force winds, as stated in the advisories. They start with no generosity for how language actually works, then twist and build from there. Another trope of their framing from news to comedy is this idea that Trump wasn't caring, but they were, that he wasn't aware of the current situation, but they are. Instead, what emerges is that while there's almost nothing accurate at all in the corporate media productions, Trump was behaving responsibly, making sure people were confident in their predictions while being praised by those around him at the national level for the wide range of information he was putting out in his tweets and statements.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for convening us today, for your focus on our readiness for this storm, and for amplifying FEMA's messages on preparedness throughout the week. Thank you also to our cabinet partners and our state governors for joining us.
On the other hand, members of the media are so trapped inside their own information bubbles, watching TV, blocking anyone that disagrees, that they begin building up and repeating errors in their echo chambers. These errors go uncorrected and probably go unknown. This happens all the time. Because they're so focused on Trump instead of finding the truth, they get lost in their own distortions.
He's still insisting that Alabama is in the path of is in a storm's path.
This is not actually correct. This MSNBC report is from September 4th, and this is a discussion of Trump's tweet and statement from 3 days earlier.
The Bahamas over the weekend. Everyone's thoughts are with the people down there. everyone but Donald Trump's thoughts, because he's still obsessed.
Should be playing some sort of role in, for example, giving aid to the Bahamas, which was absolutely decimated by this storm.
Yeah, I hope the U.S. Coast Guard, by the way, does the job in the Bahamas that they did after Katrina, because it made every American proud.
These people literally are just not very well informed, because earlier this same day it's quite clear Trump knows exactly where the storm was at that point, and that this was a secondary media controversy that was also being addressed. In this next clip, he responds to a question about what was being done in the Bahamas. Remember, this is 7 or 8 hours before this MSNBC broadcast.
The Coast Guard is over there in a very big way now. I think we have almost 8 helicopters, between 6 and 8. We'll have 8 there very shortly. It's a tremendous tragedy.
He would see it as weakness to accept a basic fact that the hurricane is now on a path nowhere near Alabama.
But we also have to watch, though, what's happening with Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina. It's on its way up, so we have to see where it hits, how it hits. We got very, very lucky in Florida, as you know, John. We talked about that a little while ago. Florida was going to take a direct hit, go right through into the Gulf, and really that would have been tragedy, and it made that right turn that a lot of people didn't expect. Very few people expected that to happen, and not only a right, it stayed fairly far away. So Florida's in great shape, and now we're going to go through some tremendous states, and we're going to see how they do. But so far it's staying away. We think it could come on in South Carolina, come very much more onshore. We'll see what happens. But so we have to keep our guard up. We're watching that, but we're also very much helping the government of the Bahamas.
Members of the corporate media not only get confused factually by output that is not centered around truth gathering, but are also incentivized to portray confidence even when their statements are merely propositions and opinions they're trying to push on you.
Mulvaney wanted to correct the record because he felt the Birmingham tweet went too far. National Weather Service tweet went too far. One that actually forecasts the weather.
That's right, it went too far. That tweet wasn't forecasting the weather. It went against the National Weather Service forecasts at the time. Just as the statement from NOAA said, they spoke in absolute terms that were inconsistent with probabilities, which said there was a 5% chance of storm force wind in southeast Alabama. Even more, the area of Alabama that was still included in some of the Dorian warnings is largely outside the Birmingham office's area of responsibility, shown on their Twitter page with this vertically squeezed map. We're beginning to see why Trump would keep drawing attention back to this story. As we just saw, forecasts on the day of Trump's tweet and statement at FEMA still included the corner of Alabama with a low probability of storm force winds.
Trump is insisting he's right, even tweeting out projections last night from over a week ago with dated information.
These media segments often made an exaggerated issue that Trump was showing dated forecasts, even though they described the development of the storm in the couple days before the controversy. And the whole issue naturally involved dated forecasts, since the topic involved a dispute regarding previous days' forecasts. To make an issue of this shows a clear lack of good faith.
WAFF, the NBC affiliate, Tennessee Valley's first alert breaking news and weather center. I hear they're looking for a weatherman. You're great. I mean, you're like natural for that. I'll keep it in my back pocket. I also want to talk about protuberances, because it's an awesome word, and it leads me to the word of the night for me, which is another P word, which is pathological.
The president is pathological.
I think if you're going to make explosive comments like that, you shouldn't make a joke of it, and you should speak clearly. This guy doesn't have any qualifications to make such a statement, and he hasn't built any case beyond alliteration and a funny-sounding word. This is journalism? They think they are the rightful watchmen over the nation? This next bit opens with a similar structure to some of the news programs, just amped up to an even further degree. It starts with an outlandish assertion, then distorts every fact leading up to the laugh. It's encouraging a simple understanding and peer pressure to join the joke or be left out. Also note how the comedy shows pick up from the news programs earlier in the day.
Think about how insane this is.
This is a very similar opening frame to "No one disputes" used in the earlier example.
Think about how insane this is. 2 of the most senior officials in our government called up a scientific agency and threatened.
Actually, the Chief of Staff told the Commerce Secretary, which oversees NOAA and the NHC, to clarify the tweet that had caused the issue. Each person in our government contacted exactly the person they were supposed to.
And threatened to fire them unless they change their forecasts about a dangerous hurricane.
The spokesman for the Commerce Department said no one was threatened with firing, and indeed no one was fired. The Birmingham tweet wasn't a forecast, it went against the forecasts, and they weren't asked to change it. Commerce Secretary Ross contacted NOAA's acting administrator and told him to fix the agency's perceived contradiction of the president.
Just so they could pretend the president was right when...
It wasn't about pretending, it was about getting NOAA to highlight language and generate another news cycle showing not only that Trump had some backing for his statements, but that the Birmingham field office was flat out wrong to use absolute language.
He accidentally said a state that was not in the hurricane's path would get hit.
He didn't say it would sustain a direct hit. Even the Birmingham tweet recognized he meant some kind of impact.
I mean, what's next?
What's next is this show then starts creating fake tweets that look just like real tweets. Keep in mind that many people report that they get their news from late-night comedy programs. They've got to exaggerate everything to keep their mental framework. The hive mind of the media is what seems pathological. As a group, they cannot back down.
He simply is not capable of processing information.
And if you simply continue to insist that you got it right, a lot of people are going to believe you, and a lot of people aren't going to believe the media, which has he's helped create a credibility problem.
The media created their own credibility problem. Trump isn't insisting in this case. This is a fake media scandal that they started, and they're the ones that insist on not backing down. The coordinated media had a weak hand, and they overplayed it, basing this whole scandal on this minor issue. Global News Canada reported the full narrative and included the actions of the mainstream corporate media, as I have here. It reported that from August 28 through September 2nd, information that NOAA provided to Trump showed that Alabama could be hit by tropical storm force wind, and that this was clearly demonstrated in 26 different hurricane advisories displaying wind speed probabilities. Indeed, a graphic produced by the administration shows outlying winds from Dorian hitting Alabama. But this was apparently news to the Washington Post.
We've seen since his book, The Art of the Deal, the ghostwriter, the co-writer of that book, someone who the president doesn't even like to acknowledge he had a ghostwriter, right?
Actually, Tony Schwartz is credited on the cover of Art of the Deal. The Wikipedia page on ghostwriting states that when credit is established for the writer, the acknowledgement of their contribution is public domain, and the writer in question would not be considered a ghostwriter.
People say that this guy would lie about the weather.
This trope about Trump lying is another media distortion, and those supposed lies are dramatically exaggerated and arguable. The actual funny thing about weather is people basing their entire spiel on weather forecasts ever being exactly correct in absolute terms. As we've seen throughout this video, all while the National Weather Service forecast still showed a 5% chance of storm force winds in southeast Alabama, only the Birmingham tweet spoke in absolute terms, and they were out of line and unscientific for doing so, and all the humor over 2 weeks and all the hysteria was based on that.
What do you reckon our allies and/or adversaries make of what they're seeing if they're getting a feed of this broadcast or any other tonight?
Hopefully our allies and adversaries have better information sources than an MSNBC show. There are embarrassing errors and weak examples all through this broadcast. They have American flags up behind them. They're reaching out to foreign governments around the world, presenting a twisted, propagandized version of the rightfully elected leader of the United States, then posing themselves as a substitute repository of national stability.
The president creates his own reality, and
he lives within his own reality at times, and he refuses to back down in the face of obvious evidence to the contrary.
This piece is also called He Lives Within His Own Reality, so obviously that is a scripted line they were all told to use. Rather than just report the facts, they are weaponizing this information. So hopefully our allies and adversaries recognize it for what it is. The establishment media and people in the television news media are truly in an echo chamber. Much of that abstract info you learned about propaganda is now all actually happening. We know echo chambers are real. We're looking at one. It's easy to think the media watches too much television and ultimately lives within their own reality. If any of this perspective was worthwhile to you, please give it a like so the video is suggested to more potential viewers. I think this story is a good example of what the corporate media is doing constantly, day after day, and as I've dug into this story, I've come across several additional points and updates that belong in a second video, so please subscribe and make sure you receive a notification. There are success stories and ongoing problems related to Dorian that all deserve more attention and follow-up, while the corporate media is off to cover their next attack on Trump. And if I could ask you for one more favor, it's to download and start using the Brave browser, using the links attached to this video. It's built on the open source foundation of Chrome. It's at least twice as fast as other browsers because it has the corporate bloatware removed and privacy walls built in and on by default, and it easily connects to an ecosystem that replaces traditional internet ads in several different ways, getting the ad trackers out and making the pages look cleaner, while supporting the publishers and companies and people you want to support. All of which could make the Brave browser one key part of a more distributed, resilient, censorship-free internet. Things that we thought were just basic principles of the internet. Hope you liked the video. Please share it with your research groups and networks.